Good afternoon, and appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. Obviously, the last 24 hours, week, 5 months, you name it, have been a challenging time for us. The decisions made yesterday by the presidents, the board of directors of the Mountain West Conference, were decisions that were thought about deeply, researched, a lot of time spent with medical experts understanding where we are with COVID-19 currently, and the presidents came to a decision that is fully supported by SDSU, by our student athletes, by our coaches and staff. While it is deeply disappointing that we're not going to play football and soccer, volleyball, cross country this fall, we are committed towards working towards competing in the spring. Our goal is that we want to give our student athletes that opportunity to play, and we feel like right now it's just not the right time to try that with all of the different health risks that could potentially be there in a COVID-19 situation. So we'll start working now with our student athletes, coaches, and staff towards the spring and what that looks like. We'll continue to have student athletes in San Diego, and our goal is to have them working out. We want to continue providing them all the necessary tools that we can, and that's something that's been important to us. We feel like the ability to have them in San Diego, to be able to provide housing or access to housing, nutrition, meals, immediate access to health care, puts them in a much better situation than they might be in otherwise. So we're going to continue to work with our student athletes and our coaches and staff as we move towards into the fall and then to the spring. And we're going to come out of this stronger and better, and we're looking forward to moving through this successfully. So at this point in time, I'll take any questions.
A couple different questions. The economics and the financial blow that you're taking at San Diego State, the loss of the NCAA money, the lack of revenue for football games, etc. How do you keep your athletic department operating with efficiency? And what is the total dollar value hit that you think you're taking by virtue of everything that's happened? And I have a follow-up too. Go ahead.
At this point, I think we're still assessing that, Lee. We're still planning on playing football in the spring. We're still figuring out what our basketball season's going to look like. So there's still going to be opportunities for revenue. If we can deliver the number of games required for our TV contract, then we'll still generate that revenue. We'll also wait to see what happens with the college football playoff, as we have, recently the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have now come out delaying their fall seasons to the spring. If the rest of the Power Five does that, then one would think that a college football playoff would happen in the spring, so there's revenue there. We've got a significant number of models from a budget standpoint drawn up. It could be anywhere from a $12 million hit down to a couple $1 million hit. And we've worked with the president and folks in business and financial affairs to understand what that is. And as we move through this, we'll work on probably what a loan would look like to the athletic department through campus that obviously we would have to repay.
I'll follow up if I could. In terms of the COVID testing, is there a dollar price tag that kind of hits you between the eyes at what it would cost to do testing of all the fall sports athletes? And is there a number you can assign to that, please?
We're still, we don't have a specific number at this point. We're still working through exactly what our testing protocol would have been once we hit competition. We have been testing our student athletes since they've been back. And we're still working through a campus opportunity from a testing standpoint. As we get back on campus, once school officially starts, we'll be able to better assess exactly what that's going to be.
Hey, JD, I know in yesterday's statement it said SDSU was going to continue to honor all scholarships. What's the direct message, though, to student athletes and concerned parents about scholarships, eligibility, and how that's going to work, especially for fall sports athletes?
We're definitely going to honor all of our scholarships. So any student athlete that's on a scholarship, if they are back in San Diego and they're practicing, or if they opt out for coronavirus reasons, their scholarship will be honored. And we've got to work through those different pieces at this point. Obviously, the health and safety and well-being of our student athletes and our coaches and our staff is at the forefront. So we're going to continue working with our repopulation plan. We've done a significant amount of work with our staff, our athletic trainers, our doctors, medical professionals across campus, and then looking at what the NCAA, the county, and the state of California have put out from a guidance standpoint, that we are creating a safe environment for these young men and women to come back and practice and compete in the spring. As far as eligibility for fall sports, again, we're looking at a spring season. The NCAA will make a ruling by the end of this week on what eligibility will be for those fall sports student athletes should a season get canceled or be impacted by the number of contests, or if they opt out, similar to what they did with our spring sports. And then I believe by August 21st, the NCAA will rule on what they're going to do with fall sports championships. If you see what's been happening today in the last couple of days, I would imagine the fall sports will probably end up getting postponed at the rate we're going. But that's another date later this month to pay attention to.
What exactly does a spring football schedule season look like? Is it like January, February, March, or more of a March, April, May? And then also, what would the ramifications be, do you think, in potentially playing 2 football seasons in 1 calendar year?
Yeah, it's a great question. We haven't spent a lot of time working through what a spring schedule would look like. I imagine it would be shortened, similar to what we were proposing, 8 to 10 games. You do have to give consideration to those schools that are located in more colder climates. Do you want to be playing football in Laramie, Wyoming in January or February? So, hypothetically, again, we haven't talked a whole lot about this. Potentially you're playing 8 to 10 games in March and April, try to have a college football playoff at the beginning of May, the first couple weeks, and then you give kids the rest of May and June off, come back with some strength and conditioning in July, and start camp in August. That's one very hypothetical situation that hasn't been discussed with a whole lot of folks. We'll obviously need to talk to coaches, student athletes, medical experts on, how many games we think is right for a student athlete to participate in any given year. So that's the work we're going to do this fall.
And would you try and restore the UCLA game, and do you think there would still be a potential bowl games for everybody?
Honestly, I don't know at this point. As we kind of figure out what everybody's going to do, there's still, I think, 5 conferences at this point that are scheduled to play ball this fall. So we'll have to see what that looks like and, see how a spring schedule kind of shapes up.
Hey, JD, one of the bigger arguments from coaches and people that wanted to see a season this year was that the players would be safer under the umbrella and the structure of the university. What are your thoughts on that? And do you feel like you guys would have been able to provide a safer structure for the players had they played a season in the fall?
Well, I think one of the misnomers that's out there, we're still going to provide that safe umbrella. Our plan is to still have student athletes here. We'll do testing. We'll be able to provide all the things, housing, nutrition, ready access to medical care. We're just not going to play games at this point. And, we'll have to work through the phases of getting back to practice. I'm not sure when we would have been able to actually hit as we think about preparing for a September, 26th football game. So we're not really going to change anything on how we're treating the health and safety of our student athletes, in that, our plan is still to keep them in town.
JD, is there contingency planning going on in the event that the spring football season is not able to be played, in terms of how that affects eligibility and everything else in that realm?
Again, it goes back to that, later this week, the NCAA is going to, come out with what happens with eligibility and whether, you have a season or you don't have a season. As I mentioned earlier, we've got quite a few different budget scenarios that, show a wide range of what could happen based on, playing sports with fans in the building, playing sports without fans in the building, playing some sports, not playing any sports at all. So we'll continue to work through all the different pieces as we move through the upcoming months. And, hopefully we continue to see great progress in the, science and medical fields of advancing testing. And, we'll see where a vaccine ends up coming in. But I think for us, the testing piece is, more important than anything else.
Hey, JD, another quick follow-up. I'm sure I probably know the answer to this, but what has been the overall consensus of your student athletes? Has there been understanding? Has there been frustration? And kind of what's their level of disappointment to this point?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm proud that we've done, I feel like our coaches and from an administrative standpoint, we've been very transparent with our student athletes. We started sharing our repopulation plan with them. A couple of months ago, we've shared the repopulation plan with parents via Zoom meetings. So we've really tried to help our student athletes understand all the steps that we're going through to make sure we can keep them as healthy and safe as possible. We had meetings, I guess it was last week after the Pac-12 and Big Ten United groups came out. We met with our football student athletes and talked about all the things that were involved there, got to hear some of their questions, some of their concerns. And I think for the most part, our student athletes have been comfortable with the health and safety guidelines that we've put in place, and that they know that we're here to take care of them and not put them into any unnecessarily risky ventures. They're obviously disappointed. They were looking forward to playing. Much like our spring student athletes were very disappointed with what happened. I mean, I can say this, the student athletes have been very happy to be back, been very happy to get back into some sense of normalcy and to be doing some things within their sports, even if they've been, extremely simple aspects of what you do within your sport. They've been excited to be back.
Hey, JD, appreciate your time. Just had a couple questions. First off, kind of along those lines, how do you determine how active teams and your student athletes are just in terms of practicing, working out, given the health concerns and given kind of the continued uncertainty about whether or not they'll actually be able to play, weighing that between having them together and deciding what's the best course of action along those lines?
Again, we've got a very extensive repopulation plan. There are various phases that they'll have to work through, to make it through the various phases, which allows them to do more, individual and then team-related activities. The other piece that we'll have to assess as we start bringing back all of our student athletes is, from a staffing standpoint, it's much more labor-intensive to conduct some of the practices and workouts. So we've really got to put together the puzzle of how we're going to get all of our student athletes back out with the opportunity to work out and be with their teammates and start to practice again. So we're working through those different pieces. I've been very happy again with the support of the folks across campus as they've helped us develop our repopulation plan. Once we got the governor's guidance last week, I was happy to read through that and see that our repopulation plan was basically met all of the requirements and might even be stricter in certain places. So we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to move through this and get our student athletes back out there. It's just going to take us a little time to move through the various phases.
And other than the obvious health concerns, what do you see as the biggest obstacle in terms of trying to conduct a football season in the spring?
Obviously it's all the different rules and parameters around conducting something safely. I mean, honestly, it's health and safety at this standpoint. Encourage everyone to wear a mask when you're out there. We've got to flatten the curve, bring the numbers down in the whole COVID-19 universe. I think, again, as I mentioned, testing is going to be a big part. If we can continue to make testing and the testing protocols and, eventually get a more accurate antigen test or the saliva-based testing, I think that'll be, hugely helpful for us. So we'll continue to watch those and continue moving through our plan, and we'll update our plan as we continue to get further guidance. And, our student athletes are excited to be back, and they've been working with us to ensure they're meeting, for the most part, those guidelines as well, because it's as important to them as it is to us to get back on the field to play.
But you don't see any additional just kind of logistical concerns that could potentially interfere with the ability of moving sports in the spring? It's solely just kind of the health piece?
I mean, at this point, yeah. I mean, it's, again, as we get, hopefully better numbers and, a better understanding of, how do we, flatten the curve with COVID? I mean, I think we proved that back in June, and then, there were certain, obvious negative impacts to how we got to where we were in June, and now we've got to, figure out how to flatten that curve again. And those are really going to be the pieces that are going to impact us, being able to get more people together, to be able to host people in a stadium or an arena or whatever. It's really about the numbers.
JD, what's the biggest challenge of potentially holding all the fall sports in the spring along with the regularly scheduled spring sports?
Probably our biggest obstacle is from a staffing standpoint. How do you ensure that you have athletic medicine, event managers, all of those different pieces to support that many sports going at once? We're more heavy in the spring as you think about the number of games that baseball and softball play. You've got lacrosse, you've got your tennis teams, swimming, water polo, all those different pieces going. And then to mix and match in there football, the soccers, and volleyball. So that's something that we're going to have to study.
Hey, JD. I'm reading the Pac-12 release on the postponement of football. They postponed competition through the end of the calendar year in the Pac-12. Has the Mountain West had conversations about postponing not just the fall sports, but also possibly competition until January of next year?
The presidents were very specific that it's an indefinite postponement, and we're still considering what, the winter sports look like. Specifically with men's and women's basketball, it's a much smaller cohort of student athletes and coaches and staff. So from a testing protocol and other pieces like that, it may be, easier to manage that and get them started prior to January 1st. But again, that's something that we'll continue to work through.
JD, with all the years of experience, this probably is the most stunning thing you've ever come across. As you sat and looked at the big picture and took in all the medical information, what scared you the most?
As you talk about, we definitely didn't have how to handle a global pandemic in AD school. And, then you throw name, image, and likeness, Austin Jenkins case, George Floyd social justice, budget concerns, COVID-19. I feel like I'm missing one more. I mean, that's a career's worth of challenging topics to deal with, and we're really getting it in about a 5-month time frame. So it's made for some interesting times, some sleepless nights. I think the biggest thing that kind of makes me go back and forth, I think we could have held a football season. I think we could have managed it. We were prepared with, the ability to meet the testing protocol of the NCAA. The Mountain West Conference as a whole was ready to do that, so we were working through the conference as well as locally to get that done. And, as you think about risk, there's inherent risk in anything that we do. The minute you step out of bed in the morning, you're accepting some level of inherent risk. With football, there's a level of risk to just playing football. When you strap on the pads, put on the helmet, and step between the lines, there's a risk to injury. But I would argue that for the most part, we recognize and understand what those risks are in a normal circumstance. The thing with COVID-19 is COVID-19's been around for about 8 months, so there's not a whole lot we know about long-term impacts. And I think that's the thing that, is really giving people pause, especially as you see some of the other information coming out about various impacts. More children are being, it's found that more children are being infected, and they can infect as easily. I mean, there's just so much we don't know. And I think that risk of the unknown is what really is probably the tipping point.
JD, along those lines, I know you're not one to complain about things you can't control, but does it feel a little more unfair for SDSU given where your basketball team was going to be, a promising baseball season, and now a football team that's building toward a new stadium with a new coach, that this is a particularly bad time for all of this to hit?
Obviously there's no good time, and I feel terrible for the student athletes and our coaches and staff that have worked so hard to get where we are today. I mean, you're talking about young men and women who have spent their entire lives, or the majority of their lives, getting to a particular point in their particular craft where they could get a Division I scholarship. So my hope is that we can, again, continue to work through this and get back to what it was. I mean, our future is so bright right now. We're going to break ground on a football stadium in the next day or two. That's going to be a phenomenal, stadium, not only for San Diego State football, our men's and women's soccer program, and lacrosse, but the community of San Diego is going to get to benefit from this stadium. And it's that long-term play. It's, our basketball program last year was phenomenal. And so disappointed for those kids that, didn't get to go to the NCAA tournament. But our women's swim and dive team had just as good of a year. They shattered the Mountain West Conference record for points. So feel really bad for them. So in the short term, this really hurts. But I'm very excited for the long-term opportunities of this athletic department. We have great coaches. We have great student athletes. Our coaches recruit quality young men and women who aren't here just to compete on the field, but they're here to compete in the classroom as well, and they want to get their degree. So, it's really challenging, but the long-term health of San Diego State University and our athletic department, we're going to be just fine.
You mentioned you guys will be just fine, but could you address kind of the overall college athletics? How catastrophic could it be if they have to go a full year without revenue? Especially some of the Power Fives, I've heard their ADs say that they could lose $100 million. How do you overcome things like that?
Well, it's going to be challenging. I mean, it's one of those things, but there are a lot of people out there right now that are having the same challenges that we are from a revenue standpoint. And we'll just have to step back and look at what's most important. And, the thing for San Diego State, if we do end up having, the larger number that, could impact us of a 12 million that we're forecasting, that would be kind of worst case scenario at this point. How do we, work with those folks that, support our athletic department, our donors, our season ticket holders, all those folks? How can we work with them to help us minimize that number this year? So, we have a tough year this year, but we also want to, minimize the impact in the coming years. So we're going to have more information on, the whole ticket process and all those different pieces in the coming days. And then we'll be working with, our community, our San Diego State University community, and the greater community on how they can help us, weather this storm and still be in great shape moving out of it. As for the Power Five, you'll need to go ask some Power Five ADs how they'll handle that. I'm not sure.
And lastly, does this impact at all what's going on moving ahead with Mission Valley?
No, we're full steam ahead on Mission Valley. We've closed some premium seats now, so the seat selling process is started. We're back started up with our philanthropic process as well. So we're really excited. I mean, coronavirus giveth and it taketh away. I mean, the interest rate that we're probably going to get on our bonds is going to save us, a couple $1 million a year on what we might have had to pay on our bond payment each year for the stadium. So again, that's one of those things that's going to help us in the long run, is that our bond payment's going to be less based on, what current rates are. So that's a positive.
JD, based upon your conversations with other university administrators and health experts, is there any sort of estimate as to when fans could be allowed in stands for sporting events?
I mean, not at this point. I mean, the governor has kind of laid out, what his expectation is. And again, it's people, wearing masks. It's people paying attention to, what they're doing, where they're going. Just being careful about coronavirus, and let's work hard to to get the number down and be smart and social distance, and it's about humankind. It's not about me. It's about everyone else.
Hey JD, at what point are decisions going to need to be made about basketball?
I think we've got a couple months yet. Our goal is men's and women's basketball will come back around, when school starts. And our goal is to get them, hopefully by that point, be able to get them inside and, working out. I think our first game is probably early November. So, sometime in the month of October, we'll obviously have to start figuring things out, making final decisions.
JD, the last Wednesday they reduced the football schedule to 10 games. In those 5 days thereafter, what was the biggest thing that changed that made it that you guys can't go forward at all?
Again, I think it's the uncertainty around all the risks, of COVID-19, and seeing different stories pop up. Presidents are, again, this is the board of directors talking to the medical experts that we have, making those decisions. And university presidents have a lot on their mind right now besides athletics. So they arrived at a place where they felt it was the time to, make that decision based on what they were hearing from the medical experts, and around how we would manage playing a season, with COVID-19, and we're fully supportive of what they did, and looking forward of moving towards the spring.